Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. So yeah, my name's Richard Goodman. I'm the Learning Technology Team Manager at Loughborough University. And my presentation is, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I'm going to try and tell you the story of 9 years of lecture capture at Loughborough in 20 minutes. So wish me luck. So it's a marathon, not a sprint, except for the bit at the end when you're asked to sprint the last 385 yards when you've already run 26 miles. So slightly tortuous analogy, but that will become clear when I tell you exactly what's been happening at Loughborough over the last 9 years. So I'll tell you very briefly about what we call the Loughborough Way, how we do things at Loughborough University. We have a mixture of homegrown, open source and commercial off-the-shelf systems, kind of depending on what we're using them for. For the more kind of corporate stuff like finance and things like that, then we'll usually have off-the-shelf systems. But we've also got homegrown things and open source things that we use. So we're a Moodle site, as you can see also on this slide. So we do things slightly differently perhaps to some of the other universities. We had our first VLE in 1998, and that's why I'm still here standing in front of you. My job in 1998 was to come in, build us a VLE, and then leave again 18 months later. Interesting way of doing things, but it didn't quite work out like that because I'm still here 20 years after that. So that was a homegrown VLE that we built kind of out of bits we found lying around on the internet, and that worked for quite a while, and then we moved to Moodle in 2007-8. That was quite a bold move, I think, at that time. Some HEIs were going that way, but with Blackboard and WebCT being really big at that time, then it was seen as a bit of an odd move, but I think we've kind of done quite well out of it over the last 10 years or so. And we then upgrade our Moodle every year. So you can see our upgrade pattern, and we're currently upgrading to Moodle 3.4. So that will be our new version of the new system coming up in about 6 weeks' time. And I should really be there doing that, but I'm doing this instead. So how do you do this marathon? This is what our training plan. In summer 2009, we had the idea of trialling a lecture cap solution with the new history degree program. Very quick information, history at Loughborough. We had a history department until 1991 when we closed it down, and then in 2009 we brought it back again as part of politics, history and international relations, and we had some new staff coming in to work on this new history program, and they had some new ideas about how they wanted to deliver this new program, and part of that was lecture capture. So we formed a team between ourselves in IT services, the Centre for Academic Practice, and our teaching sport audiovisual guys to put something together to see how this would work out. At the same time, we're investigating something called Opencast Matterhorn as part of a Steeple BR project, which was many years ago now, and obviously looking at a commercial lecture capture product at the same time. So 2009-10, we had a few scheduled lectures captured each week. There's one of the first key points, scheduled. So ever since we started this on this really tiny scale, this has all been scheduled. I'll tell you more about our current setup later, but in this setup, all the sessions were scheduled. So you walk in, thing starts at 10 o'clock, stops at 10:50, 11:50, or whatever the time is. You walk out again, and it's all done and uploaded to your area on the VLE. And that was felt to be one of our key operating points to get that scheduled thing up and running to make it really work for staff. We had 2 members of academic staff doing this initially, and 1 capture appliance with all the sessions automatically scheduled to it. You can see a tiny screenshot there of Marcus, one of our initial users, and even back in 2009 he was going straight away for flipped classroom. As soon as he'd seen this in action, after about 3 weeks, he decided to come in on a Wednesday afternoon when we don't normally have sessions scheduled. He bought various changes of clothes, and he was pre-recording sessions for the rest of the academic year, so he could use those sessions that were scheduled instead to do much more interactive stuff and have much more of a debate and kind of that. So he was much more using the time in a more productive way in his eyes. So yeah, and this was 9 or 10 years ago when this thing was just in its infancy. So demand grew as the word spread about this. We had a second capture appliance and a portable capture system, which sounds really grandiose for basically what was a MacBook in a bag. At that time, the MacBook had a decent camera, a decent microphone, and we managed to get one of these where you could schedule the sessions to it and then just turn up in the room, set it up, and have it going. Obviously that's not sustainable, as you'll see from what we've done later on, but that was fine at that time. And we captured a whole 74 sessions in that very first year, and we captured more than that in about 20 minutes now. You'll see that again later on. So next season, or academic year, increased use from academic staff. We've already gone up to 435 sessions, and we start to see some of our first non-academic uses, such as public lectures, being captured with the system. Now this was a World Cup year, as we are about to kick off in about an hour, and you may recall lots of talk about the ball, which was called the Adidas Jabulani. Loads of talk before the tournament kicked off about what an amazing ball was going to be, and some of the research had been done at Loughborough, so obviously we wanted to shout about it. A little bit less so after the tournament, because it wasn't the most popular thing in the world, probably not quite as popular as the Vuvuzela, but there we go. So anyway, that was another thing that we were doing that wasn't just lecture capture. And here's another great decision we made, or looks great in hindsight. We branded the service as Review, or Review, and staff could opt in to have sessions recorded. We also had these Wolf Vision desktop visualizers. You can see an example of a screenshot there. So this is the modern version of the OHP for those of you of a certain age. And lots of our subject areas were really keen on using this, and that's one of the reasons they wanted to try it out with lecture capture. Our materials engineering department were on board with this. They were just launching a new distance learning course, and they had the option of rewriting all their distance learning material and sending out a big old-fashioned wad of paper, or actually trying to put a lot of this material online, capture these sessions and let the students watch remotely. And having these visualizers enabled them to do that. They could demonstrate lots of things, almost like using it as an in-class microscope, obviously without the resolution of a proper microscope, but being able to demonstrate, you know, a shear force on a bolt or something like that, they felt was really good, and the students really enjoyed it. We move on again. Now we've got 7 capture appliances in some of our rooms across campus. It's only a tiny amount of our rooms. And we start to see further non-academic use cases for the system. We start to see captures of sessions for prospective and pre-arrival students. So this is a screenshot from a session that was done for some of our pre-arrival students to kind of give them a flavour of what's on campus, what you can expect. You can drive around our campus on the Google map because the Google car's been driving around all of it. But this gives it a bit more context about what all those buildings are and how you get from A to B and what kind of things you expect when you arrive at Loughborough. And again, we had feedback from the students. They really valued this. They thought it was really, really helpful. We also start to see the system being used for capture of student presentations. We heard a bit about this earlier on, for marking and as well as for student reflection. So the students themselves could watch themselves back and see how their presentation skills were, what areas they were weak on, what areas they wanted to develop a bit more. And we had 629 sessions captured during this year. The next year, we renewed our license for our existing system with just 7 hours to spare at the end of the financial year. That was a stressful day, believe you me. After lots of toing and froing and people deciding that, yeah, maybe we should continue with this thing. It's not just a flash in the pan. Let's try a bit more lecture capture. We'd been up and running, and we continued. We had a running total at this point of 2,000 captures completed, around 4,000 hours of content in total. And we start to get some more useful feedback from students. This is from one of our distance learning areas. Video tutorials are excellent, allows distance learning students to be in the classroom from afar. And that's something that's really been resonated through some of our distance learning students. It makes them feel connected. They like to see where we've got video of the lecturer. They like to see the people that are actually teaching them this course that they'll probably never get to meet, but they like to feel that connection with them. Our on-campus students were less worried about that because they see them all the time, but distance learners really said they loved that. And we start to see feedback that students in this era were using lecture capture as a criterion when choosing the modules they want to do next year. Has it got lecture capture? I feel more likely to want to choose that because I think it helps me to study. Another example here of our overhead projectors being used. We teach mathematics, as many of you do, and there's some engineering mathematics being worked through on the board. And again, students said they found these kind of sessions really useful to follow these things as they go along. Total of 938 sessions captured this year, and we held our first lecture capture conference at Loughborough. I'm in that picture somewhere, and 1 or 2 people in this room are also in there. We won't dwell on that. Next season, academic year, usage of the system doubles again, and the take-up is driven by the student voice, and this is something we've seen a lot at Loughborough, and again reflected in some of the sessions earlier on. 1,701 sessions captured in this year. We created a lecture capture working group to develop our institutional strategy. So remember, this is just kind of still a pilot project that's just kind of rumbling on in the background with the combined forces of IT, CAP and teaching support getting this kind of pushing it along quietly, but an institutional strategy was clearly needed at this point, and we started to use it for elite athletes. So the one thing most people know about Loughborough is that we do sports stuff, and we're quite good at sports stuff, and we've got quite a lot of elite athletes who come and study with us. So we've got people in different sports who do different things at different times of the year, who may be away on training camps for a couple of weeks, or training at altitude in Kenya for their athletics in January, or whatever it is. So we start to see that more and more of those students were getting in contact with their lecturers to say, can you use this system so I don't miss stuff when I'm away on training camps? Obviously legitimate reasons for being away. We have lots of ways in which we support those students, and this is just another one that they really liked. 2014-15, continuing, we commissioned a study into lecture capture to look at some of the evidence that was around at the time. We had a study of our own staff, and it was very much a black and white split. Those that loved it, those that used the system loved it. Those that hadn't used the system didn't like it. Just as black and white as that. The evidence completely showed that. So we got some more evidence together to try and show people that this is not such a bad thing. People are not going to not turn up to your lectures like you thought when we bought you a VLE 20 years ago. They're still going to want to do this. They want access to these people who are teaching them these subjects. So we had another conference, and we captured 3,001 sessions in that year. And we launched the first university lecture capture policy. And the wording is, university strongly encourages the recording of lectures with review in undergraduate and postgraduate teaching for the benefit of both campus-based students and distance learners. Review will not be used by the university to replace student contact time for campus-based students. Service is provided to supplement contact time. So a very clear policy, not a very strong message, you must do this, you must do that, but something that was felt to be helpful, friendly, useful to students, but without being too aggressive in the way it went about things. So we move on another year, and what does every sleepy Midlands market town university do? Launch up in London, of course. Loughborough University London starts up. We're on the Olympic Park in the old broadcast centre. Now they're a completely new school in our structure when they launch, so they've got no preconceived ideas about what to do and how things have been done for the last 20 years. So their policy was slightly different, and they went for the approach that all lectures and associated teaching sessions, seminars, group work, etc., where appropriate, are to be captured electronically using review. So they basically went all in from day one, and found that was a very helpful thing for their students. We also opened a branch of IKEA called the West Park Teaching Hub, which was previously a Ford college where we delivered courses, which hence its colour scheme, which we didn't change very much. And that brought a large number of new rooms onto campus, and they all had lecture capture put in at this time. So we've got 40 capture devices online, so that's 40 rooms with a specific lecture capture device, and then around 75 classroom capture installations, which is just a software version of the lecture capture system that we were using. So most of our rooms have got coverage, but there's kind of a two-tier system here. You've got the capture devices and then the classroom captures. So they're working broadly the same way, but there are some differences, so it's not a consistent experience. On we go again, and then this year we migrated to the cloud-hosted service of Echo 360 that we were using at the time, and we launched a new digital strategy for teaching and learning, and this is where we start to get ready to start sprinting. So, for students, we decide we want to deliver outstanding learning opportunities supported appropriately through the use of technology and personal support. For staff, a good understanding of the technology that underpins and supports the student learning experience and the learning environment itself. Exceptional, accessible and dynamic, inspires outstanding participation and innovation. All very big words. What does it all mean? We'll find out in just a second. So let's stop for a graph. Everybody loves a graph. So this was up to the launch of our digital strategy. So this is our growth coming very slowly along from that tiny amount over there in 2009-10 to a reasonable number of sessions that have been captured in the 2016-17 academic year. We'll come back to that graph in a second. So here comes the sprint. So one of the first digital strategy projects that was launched in January 2017 was a review of requirements for what was then called teaching event capture. So again, we're moving away from this concept of lectures. Obviously lectures are a part of that, but we're looking at all teaching events, not just lectures. This led to the selection of a new lecture capture platform, and we decided to go all in with 140 rooms equipped with identical capture devices. So essentially the experience now in all of our rooms across campus is exactly the same. They've all got exactly the same setup. So you can walk in and use the in-class equipment, or you can bring your own equipment in and plug in and lecture off your iPad or your MacBook or whatever you've got, and you have exactly the same experience, and it's all scheduled. So the teaching event capture policy, which is our new version, is launched, which leads to the automated recording of audio and material presented on screens with the option to opt out. So we've got rooms with video cameras on, but they are not on by default, but you can request them if you want them. We didn't install them across the board because that was thought to be quite a big barrier, that people thought they would be expected to use the video camera, and they were quite worried about having to use that, so they didn't want that. So it's all automated through our timetabling system, and you have the option to opt out of publishing, so it will still be captured but then not published to the students, or recording. And if you opt out of recording, then one of the things it then asks you is what provision you will be making for students with any additional needs that might be in your classes. You can very easily opt out of recording, but what are you going to do for other students who might need to access these things? And that's then in the court of the academic to decide what they want to do. And also importantly, recording can be paused in rooms. So you can see there an example of our lights. So those in all our rooms, that's a green light, show that the recording is in progress. If you give it a tap, it will pause the recording and it will change colour. And if you give it a tap again, it will start the recording up again. So that part is not captured for publishing. And this kind of ability to have control in the room was another thing that was a big selling point that we helped to get this system adopted. So we launched our new system, Panopto, on the first day of term, literally because the last installation was completed the previous night. We've all got some grey hairs, as you can tell, and that was caused by doing all of this, 140 rooms in 3 months, as well as integrating it with our timetabling system and with Moodle as well. Don't do it that way. Please don't do it that way. We did it, but don't ask us how. It's a blur. So we made more recordings in the first month than in all of our previous year, and after our first term we had recorded the most sessions of all Panopto customers at that point in the year. Over 220,000 hours of recorded material has been delivered to students. This number was taken a few weeks ago when I had to submit this presentation. That's now over 250,000 hours. We're in an exam and revision period, and you'll see a graph in a second, which will look very similar to one you saw this morning. So yeah, another 30,000 hours have been used up in the last 2 weeks. And we've had overwhelmingly positive student feedback. Lectures are a useful resource for revision. It allows me to go through the lectures at my own pace. I can repeat segments of the lectures as often as I like. Loads of stuff like this. Feedback we got before we had this opt-out system was basically, so-and-so is using it, why aren't you using it, why isn't it on all my modules? We heard that from the student panel earlier on today, wish it was on all my modules, and we've kind of largely cracked that by going for this advanced policy. Staff feedback as well, good staff feedback. Students who are absent for legitimate reasons such as illness or interviews have a way of catching up that does not use my time. That's an excellent piece of feedback that we received. Obviously, if you've got a few students missing for legitimate reasons, they're not coming then knocking on your door to go, what was the thing that you covered? Tell me about it, give me the notes, fill in some blanks. The lecture is there for them to watch at their leisure. And here's another good one. I know which parts of the lecture the students found hard to understand and where I need to improve things next time. And that's my Vice-Chancellor. He also does some lectures very occasionally, and that's a bit of feedback that he put in his Vice-Chancellor's newsletter, which goes out to all staff. So he's a big advocate as well. So back to our graph. So there it was before the current academic year. Let's put the next academic year in. Oh dear, we've really dwarfed it. Look at that. So yes, we've done a lot of recordings by having everything pretty much being recorded. As you can see, that makes a big difference to the amount of stuff that's available to students. There we go, there's our usage graph. Again, anyone spot the exam periods? Anyone? Yes. So again, that was 2 weeks old, so the last bar is actually higher than the last bar that you can see there, and then the next one is about the same one as the penultimate bar that you can see up on that screen. So yeah, as you can see, it's very popular with students, and they really are using it throughout the year, but hugely for revision. Right, there we go, there's the marathon and the sprint. I'll stop there and take some questions. Thank you. We haven't got an updated policy for that yet, so that's something we'll be working on later on this year. At the moment we'll have everything forever, but we will have a policy developed on that once we're had a bit of time to stop and rest.
I wanted to ask if you've got any data on whether or not use of the system over these years has aided retention of students and also their performance in terms of achievement.
We have the data, but we haven't analysed it yet. We had hoped to do a bit of analysis of some of that kind of stuff during this year, but due to some of the other tenants of this building causing lots of staff to go on strike earlier in this year, we haven't actually been able to do that.
Your London campus, you had a policy which was an expectation that everything would be captured where appropriate. What does that mean?
What's inappropriate? For our London campus, it's a completely postgraduate set of courses, so there's no undergraduate teaching, and there's a lot of kind of innovation, entrepreneurship type things taught, and we get lots of commercial things coming in. So let's say, you know, IBM come in and show us a super secret disk or something. So those kind of situations where there's sensitive stuff that they don't want shared with anybody anywhere. So those are the kind of sessions where we've had things opted out.
Does staff have to give a reason to opt out, or do you just have to explain what they'll do for learners with additional needs?
Staff are asked to give a reason in which they're opted out. Those reasons are captured. We haven't had the chance to do the analysis yet, but the information is recorded and can be shared with high senior members in the department if there's anything to go on. But it's been such a small number that.
So it's a kind of automatic approval.
Yeah, so it's recording by default unless you go into the timetabling system and say opt out of recording or publishing. And that's either the whole thing or maybe just a specific week or 1 out of 2 events in that specific week. So yeah, so it's all automated, and you can delay publishing as well. So we heard about this earlier on. Normally publishing is 24 hours after the end of the event, or 72 hours if that event finishes on a Friday. So 12:50 on Friday is then published at 12:50 on Monday. But you can then also delay that by a different amount, but no later than the end of week 11, which is our teaching period. So you have to release them by the end of the whole teaching period for that, for them to be available to the students at some point. So, and not many people do that, but a few of them have done.
So just pick up on what you mentioned. Do you know roughly number-wise how many people who have decided that they are opting out?
It's a very small number, something in the region, again I haven't got the latest figures, around less than 5% of sessions being captured have been opted out of publishing, and even fewer than that have been opted out of recording completely.
And in terms of your sprint finish, how would you go about engaging with the departments and the academics in terms of training and making sure they were up to speed with the system?
So last September, pretty much every single day there was training sessions. We called them training sessions, but we didn't really want to call them training sessions because they're not really training. They're just kind of, this is what's coming, this is how it works, this is what you have to do, which is not a lot unless you wish to opt out. or if you wish to edit the sessions later, and hardly any of them do, they're very happy with the content being up and running and there as it is. If they want to snip something out, then they're very happy that they can quickly do that in the editor. So yeah, essentially we had a month of sessions in various places around the campus. We went into schools and departments to deliver that training. Say training is not the right word, but it's the word that people understand for a session where we're coming to tell you stuff. But again, we struggled with the word training because we're like, you don't really need training because there's not a lot to get your heads around, but just to kind of show you how it works, show you what you need to do if you wish to make a change to the default, and yeah, just kind of show you some of the advanced features if some people wanted to do advanced stuff like joining things together and putting quizzes in the middle and all the other stuff you can do. But we very much tried to just kind of get people walking before they started trying to jog and then run. So.
Oh, sorry, Mark, I was about to start, right? I guess the other side of that is how have you seen student expectation sort of change and grow now, sort of the students coming in, sort of trying to shift as well with that expectation there?
It's something we've seen from prospective students that they seem to be expecting such a thing to be available now because they're visiting lots of places and finding it's available, and it's kind of one of those things that when we didn't have kind of blanket coverage almost, then we were seeing a bit of feedback of going, well, why is it not in here? And I've been to this department and they've got it, kind of thing. So yeah, it's been a positive selling point, I think, for us. But again, we haven't done all of the research into everything around it, but it's been seen as a positive.
I was just wondering whether you have any vision for closed captioning for the stuff that you're recording, and I was wondering how you manage that, given the kind of volume of recording that you're doing.
We've done a small amount of closed captioning on, let's say, about 50 sessions as kind of as a trial run to see what provision that would be for. So we've had a couple of requests from a couple of module leaders who have got students with additional needs that wanted closed captioning. So we used a proper captioning service to do that, which has had a good turnaround time and a good response from the students who said it's really helped them to kind of interact and understand the lectures. Obviously, it's not something we could do on a large scale because it's prohibitively expensive given the amount of sessions that are up there. But yeah, it's something that we've done a quick experiment with and been pleased with the results. So when we kind of develop that into a policy and work out a bit more around it, then I expect we'll see quite a bit more of it in the next year.
What are you capturing in each room? Is it the same? Do you have cameras in every one of your 40 rooms?
So 40 rooms have cameras and the other 100 basically have screen and audio being captured by default. So the cameras are all off by default, but you can request them switched on if you're in a room where it has that facility. So when you make a request for your room booking, if you say I want a room with a camera because I want to be recorded on camera, then that will be taken into account. So.
Following on the same question, how are you picking up the presenter audio?
So we have boundary mics in the lecterns for all of the rooms. Larger rooms also have additional amplifications, so they'll have swan neck mics like these, radio mics like the one which didn't quite work earlier on, and one or two other rooms have a few additional features. So for the smaller rooms, there's a very small lectern and you can't really go anywhere. For our bigger rooms, as I kind of wouldn't have minded doing earlier on, you can wander about a bit, and the boundary mics will pick you up from a reasonable distance. But again, as we heard earlier on, keeping within the microphone area, which is reasonably large but not as ideal as we'd like, is obviously ideal from the student's perspective.
Okay, so the boundary mic is a specific area rather than the whole room?
Yeah. Yeah, so the source that comes with Projector, so each room has got a mixer in it, so whatever's on the screen, be it one of those visualizers that you saw earlier, or the PC screen, or your laptop that you plug in, yeah, anything that's being projected onto the screen, essentially. More time, I think.
Just wanted to pick up, there was a very subtle change that you spent quite a while slowly ramping up with FF316. You then had technology change. Was that to enable the increase,
That's a very long-winded answer, which I'm around later on, so I'll talk to you about later on. Otherwise, we'll be here for another 10 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.